Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a Marine Corps major, entrepreneur, and Harvard Business School graduate. No other than Mr. Mike LeBlanc.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Welcome back to one of my podcasts, Mr. Mike. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yes. The big building blocks are 14 years that I spent in the Marine Corps. Did 3 tours to the Middle East during that time. Also spent 2 years at the Pentagon acquiring new technologies. That got me interested in a lot of new companies, a lot of new tech that was coming out. Got out, graduated from Harvard Business School, and after Harvard, founded a company called Cobalt Robotics with 2 friends of mine, Eric and Travis. We sold that company in 2024, and then I co-founded another company with my partner now, Sunkempa Tech, called Foundation Future Industries, where we make humanoid robots.
Humanoid robot. We love that, Mr. Mike, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And let's talk about your book. Of course, What If Anger is the Answer? You subtitle your book A Harvard Marine's Guide to Shaping Aggression. Those two identities, Harvard and Marine, are rarely combined. How did each shape your understanding of anger differently?
I think what's so interesting about Harvard and Marine is I would send emails once I got into Harvard to all kinds of people all around the world, and the subject line of them would be Harvard Marine, and that email would get opened by everybody. Jeff Bezos got back to me, Reed Hastings, CEO of Netflix, got back to me, Mark Cuban got back to me. I just got to meet all of these incredible people. And I think that's because in just very short period of time, Harvard Marine to the American mind says this is someone who's smart and aggressive. And aggression is one of those funny things that if you don't have, an adjective before it to describe what it is or a context, it can either be very good or very bad. I had a guy coming into my company that we hired, and everybody described it to me. They said, "Oh, you're going to love me, so aggressive." And I thought, "Oh, this is great. Bring this guy in here." He was going out and selling robots and things. I was like, I need somebody aggressive. If one of my daughters came home and said, "Oh, Dad, you're going to love my date tonight. He's really aggressive." I'd be like, "Get my shotgun." So aggression is one of those funny things that could go either way. And I think that's where, Marines sort of capture that aggression. But having Harvard also makes people kind of go, okay, there's a balance here. What is going on there? What can we do to that aggression?
You draw on the ancient Greek belief that anger required its own education. What does a well-known educated anger look like, and what does an arrogant, destructive anger look like in a practice?
Well, it's interesting. So Socrates splits the soul into 3 parts. And 2 of the parts are very well known to us. One is the mind, which he casts as a little man, right? It's a little rational man. That's what it feels like to have a mind. And then the appetite he represents with a hydra, a many-headed beast that every time you cut off the head of one, 2 grow back in its place. And I think that makes a lot of sense for us. Right? We all know what it's like to try to stop ourselves from eating too much or going out too late, or just getting to bed on time is a struggle, right? Waking up in the morning is a struggle. That's all the hydra. And so a lot of debates seem to be described between those 2 parts: an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. And I think that's how a lot of modern psychology talks about it, is in 2 parts. You sort of have this divine-like mind that's capable of reasoning, a sort of supercomputer. And then you have a body, this animalistic part of you that needs food, needs water, needs sleep, that you need to take care of. But Socrates has this 3rd part, and the 3rd part is anger. And so that was really the mystery to me, was why does he have a third part at all, right? We all have these debates with ourselves, but what is that third part? And have it be anger, which he shows with a lion as anger, which was very strange to me that he would have such a noble and regal creature. But that was what he was pointing to, is an educated anger as a full part. Otherwise, anger sort of runs amok through the whole soul.
Interesting. Mr. Mike, the book asks if or what if anger is the answer. For the reader who has only ever experienced anger as a destructive in themselves or others, how do you convince them to even entertain the question?
Yeah, well, I think this book certainly isn't for everyone, right? And the cover, I created the bust on the cover, which is sort of half man and half monster, and that's because a metaphor that I've used for a very long time is that when we're put on this earth, we are like big blocks of marble, and our experiences cut away at different little parts of that. And so you end up with people that do have traumatic uh, instances in their life, which just take off a big chunk of marble and don't do much to shape it. But there are other people who can take, similar experiences and have a big block of marble come off, but they're able to shape it into something. And so that's something that I've always thought about, is what are you carving this into? And so my hope is that it's a bit inviting to think, we cast it as a question. What if anger is the answer? It's not anger is the answer. What if it is, right? What if it's part of the answer? And if it is, what's the question, right? But all of these things are trying to get people to start thinking about what does that look like if anger is a tool, if it's something that I can use to shape my soul instead of something that I use to destroy things outside myself.
Hmm. Very well said. Mr. Mike, you led 150 troops against ISIS and deployed 3 times in the Middle East. Was there a specific moment in combat when you realized that anger, properly shaped, could be a tool rather than liability?
There was a time that I was living with the Afghan National Army. So the Afghan National Army needed advisors. We would advise them on all their patrols, everything like that. And I had one of my staff sergeants, Staff Sergeant Williams, sitting with me over with them in one of their tents. They would just have these big tents set up, and we'd all be eating in there. And all of a sudden, there were gunshots as we were sitting there. Now, we'd been used to being shot at outside when we were on patrols. We were used to having the base shot at, but we'd never heard gunshots inside the walls before. And most of the Afghan soldiers responded just like they would in a shooting in the U.S. Right? They all ran out as fast as they could. Everybody was just trying to get away and trying to get safe. But I looked over, and Staff Sergeant Williams, who was with me, he was moving directly toward the gunshots, and I instinctively followed him on this and was very, very happy to have him there. But what was interesting about the story to me was Staff Sergeant Williams was the only one who knew to get up and had the agency to go respond to the problem instead of running out, even though we're all soldiers there. And when I thought about Williams, he was the youngest of 5 boys. He was born in a trailer park, no money, kind of just treated like the runt, always told that he would never amount to anything. And Staff Sergeant Williams, he was still a loose cannon a lot of the times. When we were flying in one time through Kyrgyzstan, he started to fight me. Right, he got so drunk there because we were allowed to have alcohol that he started to fight me, even though I outranked him, and he would get out of hand like that. But he had a lot of anger and resentment built up toward people telling him that he wasn't going to make it, and he got very set on proving that he was going to turn himself into something. And so he was somebody who had used that shame to then shape himself. He would force himself into these very difficult workouts. He would force himself into studying and mastering, these very complicated techniques. He was an expert shot. He knew all of these different weapons. And I think that is a great example of what it looks like when you use that anger, when you say, I'm more angry at who I am for being lazy and incompetent than I am wanting to just sit back and relax.
Mr. Mike, you've seen anger in its most raw, life or death form. What's the difference between anger that keeps a Marine alive and a combat that anger that gets a soldier killed?
Well, the anger that would get us all killed is familiar to anybody listening, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's the road rage that we feel. It's how we feel when somebody gives us, when somebody screws us over, when somebody lies to us, when we feel betrayed. Um, all of those kind of overreactions to things, right? A car cuts you off, and you're wishing that the whole car would explode. Those kinds of overreactions, that's where anger is a problem. And I think that, you know, if anger is not the answer, resentment often is the answer instead. And that's sort of the problem, is that we've gotten very good at suppressing that kind of negative anger, that sort of toxic anger. And instead, we just build up a lot of resentment. I know a lot of parents, I've got three little kids, 6, 7, and 8 years old. And, people think that my wife and I are very strict and that we have a lot of discipline in our house, which we do. But because of that, we also have a lot of freedom, because instead of letting our kids kind of run wild over us and just suppressing that anger down and saying, come on, guys, please. Oh, could you guys go brush your teeth, please? Right? Instead of doing that, we will get angry with them acutely, right? In the moment about whatever it is that we're angry at. We correct it with punishment. And after that, it's back to love, kissing, cuddling, fun. And I think that's where anger can really start to show itself as an answer for people, is realizing it's better to be acutely angry than it is to be consistently resentful.
Your message has resonated with audiences concerned about war on boys and labeling of masculinity as toxic. How do you distinguish between toxic aggression and healthy, constructive aggression?
Yeah, well, this is what my mom always says, is dose makes the poison, right? And
Mm.
I think that there are times and situations, the battlefield is a great place to have a lot of aggression and a real edge and focus. But maybe in a civilian context, right? I run civilian companies now. Those are not good places to go and have the same kinds of things that we did in the military. In the military, you would have what's called a hot wash after any exercise. During the hot wash, everybody gets in a room or a tent, and you say everything that everybody else screwed up. You just say it very directly. You're like, this wasn't right, this wasn't on time, and that's your fault. You screwed this up. That that would not go over well at a lot of different companies, right? And so it's really having the judgment to realize when and where that should be done. And I think that we have far too many people that have been using this sort of tool as a weapon in the civilian world. They've been using it to make women sleep with them. They've been using it to lord people's jobs over them. They've been using it to make people their personal servants. And that's where you really see those nasty tyrannical impulses really start to come out.
Mm. Indeed. The Newport Harbor Republican Woman event frame your book within a critique of modern cultures, pull towards softness and stagnation. Is that where you see the primary crisis? That we lost the ability to channel aggression constructively?
Yeah, I think that we are caught at a really interesting moment, and it's by moment I mean historical moment, maybe the past 10 or 20 years, um, but where political correctness has really stopped us from saying things that are very simple and very direct. And so now, to be someone who says something very simple and direct, you also have to, the pendulum goes the other way, and you have to say crazy things. So you have sort of people saying crazy things on both sides. But to me, that's the main problem, is really figuring out how can we let out anger without having to buy a rifle and plot an assassination with someone, right? How can we make it that we don't have this society that is so polarized that we are either saying, you can't say the word hate in a school, or on the other hand, it's going to be somebody that's bringing a gun into the school. That's that to me is showing that there is just too large a gap between what we're allowing. And when you don't let that permissible behavior through, you'll end up getting the ones that really break the boundaries like that.
Hmm. Interesting. Mr. Mike, you co founded two robotics companies and raised money from top tier Silicon Valley firms like Sequoia and Founders Fund. How has shape aggression helped you in fundraising, board meetings, or negotiations?
Well, I think that's really when I was brought in to Cobalt, right? My co-founders are geniuses. They are robotics geniuses. I mean, they know this stuff inside out. Their engineering is absolutely incredible. And what they really wanted me for, to round them out, was to have someone who could drive the business, but also someone who was going to be able to get along with our customers. We were selling into we would replace security guards with robots back then. And and so in the early days, the investors were very happy that they had the right engineers that could really take on these very hard technical problems, but that they also had someone like me who would be able to drive revenue, drive sales, and just make sure that all the trains are running on time. And I think that's a way that a lot of people have seen, people from the military able to come in. It's the ones with that directed anger, and not just that sort of lackluster resentment, that are able to get everything working in order.
Mr. Mike, you explore what Helmet doesn't understand about revenge. Without spoiling the book, what did Shakespeare get wrong about anger and vengeance?
Well, yeah, Shakespeare. I think Shakespeare got it all right. So I'm always sitting trying to learn what Shakespeare had. And what's so interesting is that with Hamlet, Hamlet is someone who modern audiences would like. He is conscientious, he's smart, he's educated, he's funny at times. He sort of has the world at his fingertips, but he's brought from this intellectual haven of being able to study in a wonderful college campus, and he's brought into a sort of barbaric revenge play where his uncle killed his father and then married his mother, right? And Hamlet really resents his position for having to do that. He doesn't want to have to do what needs to be done. He knows that he needs to go and kill his uncle, or at least take back the throne from his uncle. Um, but that is the primary challenge of the play, is him debasing himself to even enter that barbaric world. He wants to be above it. He wants to be too pure. And I think that a lot of people find themselves in this position, right? If you've ever been somewhere when somebody gets punched in the face, right? If you're in civilized company or anything like that, and somebody gets punched or tackled or anything like that happens, there's sort of a shock that comes over that person. Like, that's you shouldn't be doing that to me. I'm not in that world, right? It's like getting dragged out of your own story. And and I think that's where Hamlet needs to realize, right? To be a leader, he really does need to go and take whoever the usurper is, whether that's his uncle or whoever that is. That's the job, is to get in there and to be able to take that person out. And so, it's as we see at the end, Hamlet finally lets his anger out as just a boiling rage. He ends up dead, and so do all of the other named characters in the play, or everyone except for one character named Fortinbras. But they all end up in a bloody mess across the stage. And I think that is Shakespeare really telling us that's what happens when you're too pure to live your own life.
Certainly, Mr. Mike. You've been a Marine, a Harvard student, a Pentagon advisor, a Silicon Valley founder. Which version of you was angriest, and which version learned to shape it best?
Oh, the angriest was me in high school for sure. Before I had things. I never planned on going to college. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I'd seen my cousins go to college, and I didn't think that it looked like a good place where I would actually get an education. And back then, I think that I really had a thought of me against the world. I think most teenagers have this is where they really start. Is it's me against everybody else, and I'm going to prove that I'm the best. Some people carry that with them through their entire lives, and even though it's softened by the time they're in their 40s and 50s, it's still there. They still think about it as them versus everyone else. For me, as I went into the Marines, I really started to see that was really an us versus them. I started to get teams that I liked a lot, and I realized that if I was going to be at the top of something, it was going to be because I was held up by the people around me. And even past there, you have to deal with all kinds of new strangers and weird people that enter your life that aren't quite on your team, but they're not quite against you either. And you have to get very good at discerning who those ones are. And
Mm.
and so I think that was really the arc for me, was being very angry as a young teenager, but going through this maturation process of realizing I rely on other people uh, to reach my goals, to defend me, to stay safe in the environments that I was in, but also to build things, right? And that's how I can now have these robotics companies. I did not know how to build these robots, but fortunately, I have great people on my teams who are incredible building the robots, and together we're able to build a company.
Your publisher described this book as the field manual for generation tried of positivity and ready to take the offensive. What does it mean to take the offensive in work, life, and leadership without becoming destructive?
Well, I think the biggest thing that's stopping people in their lives is cynicism. A lot
Mm.
of us, we become cynics, and we think that's just being an adult, right? We go, yes, everybody's going to let you down, so don't trust anybody. That kind of becomes the default, is, don't trust anybody or anything. Don't trust people's promises. Everything's going to fall through. You're usually right if you make those bets. But the problem is, if you're very cynical and you make bets like that all the time, you're never going to win big on one.
Mm.
And people who are optimists get cast a lot as being naive, but they are the ones that are going to make the biggest bets that are going to pay off. And so I think that what I've really come to through this process of understanding what that anger is and how to shape it, I've really put myself in a position to understand how to be realistic about the world, but how to still be idealistic about it, right? And it's a sort of grounded idealism that you come out with. But when you exercise that judgment, you're able to do very hard things in the real world and get them done, but you're also able to make these long shot bets that seem like dreams to anyone around you.
Very well said, Mr. Mike. Truly, truly empowering. If someone picks up your book and implements its lessons, what would be the different about them a year later? How will their relationships, their work, and their inner life have changed?
Well, I think that it will really start with them being more honest with themselves. This to me is when you go to boot camp in the military, you have no
Mm.
secrets, and so your shame is on full display. This is a place where the towel that you get in the Marine Corps is the size of a dinner tray. You don't get a private shower. You're walking through a serpentine of showers with 100 of your best friends. The toilets don't have stalls, right? They're just out in the bathroom. When you are living in that environment, and when you are living with drill instructors who will call out your every weakness, who will make you feel ashamed of it, make fun of you, get others to be sneering at you, right, and even punish other people for your mistakes so that other people get angry at you again. That is an environment where you start to take out everything out of yourself. There's nowhere to hide. So in the civilian world, we're very good at having these little pockets where your friends are going out, you say, oh, I'm not feeling that good tonight, you don't go. Or there's a presentation that you're nervous about tomorrow, and you say, could somebody else do it? And they say, yeah. The military really forces you to face your fears and confront your weaknesses. And I hope that that's the argument that I'm giving in this book, so that someone reads this. It should take 3.5, 4 hours to read. I wanted to write something that you could read on a transcontinental flight, and hopefully that new framework is a seed for people to start going, instead of just feeling ashamed and saying that I have imposter syndrome. How can I really take a look at myself, and what would I fix if I could fix something?
Well, good luck for that, Mr. Mike. I hope you will fix lots of people all over the world. And to wrap up our discussion for today, you've written a book arguing that anger can be the answer. What's the question? The one question that if we answered it will, or it with shape aggression, would transform our lives.
I think the question is something like, how do you expect me to build something with these people who constantly betray me in this world that constantly enters new disasters, and when I'm always building a sandcastle that's going to be knocked down by an ocean wave, right? How do I do that? Anger might be the answer to that question.
Beautifully articulated, Mr. Mike. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your debut book, What If Anger Is the Answer?
Yeah, this, and people can find this on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever you find books, it's available for pre-order, and also whatifangeristheanswer.com. And would really love to poured a lot of myself into this. I've worked very hard on writing something that I thought my kids would benefit from. So, sharing that with anybody that will give it the 3.5 to 4 hours that it takes to read.
Certainly, people will support Mr. Mike LeBlanc because if you support him, more and more empowering books like this to rise. So, Mr. Mike, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Monica people, see you soon.